You're watching The John Wood Jr. Show. I'm your host, John Wood Jr. Mr. Luke Phillips, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It's good to be back in Los Angeles. It's good to be with my dear old buddy and friend and life boss in some senses, John Wood Jr. And so I'm just honored to finally be in the network studios as well after everything that's happened here. So
Yeah, man, definitely. Well, all compliments, of course, to our producer, Mike Cassantini. Yeah, man. So this is an interesting moment because there's a way in which we are coming full circle. Now, so for folks watching here, uh, so we are in the process of launching the John Wood Jr. Show. As of the moment you and I are having this conversation, this show has not yet been launched, but as of the moment when people are watching it, of course, it likely will be. Now, this is an impromptu conversation. You just happen to be in town. We're in Los Angeles right now. And you hit me up. You told me you were going to be around. Of course, we saw each other the other day. We met with a buddy of ours, Greg Steinbrecher, who, of course, is the Braver Angels diehards.
I'm sleeping on your couch tonight. So
you're sleeping on my couch tonight. And so we thought, wouldn't it be cool to do a podcast? Didn't have any time to think about what we ought to talk about. But I figure since the John Wood Jr. Show has a little bit to do with John Wood Jr., and since I am blessed to have about, 2 or 3 dozen people out there in the world who are actually interested in my, in my thoughts and perspectives, but also my life and experience and so forth, it seemed like it might make a little bit of sense for you and I to trace a little bit of my journey sort of to Braver Angels, through politics, preceding that, and maybe for us to riff a little bit about the mission of Braver Angels, myself, yourself, this larger sort of shift and movement in American cultural and political society that we are a part of without knowing entirely how it is going to fully mature and manifest or know entirely where it is ultimately going to go. But we have some thoughts and some inclinations.
Well, John, given that my grift is the I knew John Wood Jr. before you knew John Wood Jr. grift, I am more than happy to talk about you and talk about our kind of relationship and all the things we've been doing, all the things our friends around the country are doing, just here in the context of this show. And I'm honored as well to be pre-recording an episode on it, and it's just kind of cool to see this in the intro stages. So thank you for having me on this.
Yeah, man, 100%. Okay, so, and of course, you're not just a character in my story, but really, I mean, I wouldn't actually be here in Braver Angels.
I'm not his dad.
Were it not for you. No, that's, yeah, well, we can avoid that confusion well enough. So, all right, man, so let's jump into it. So, okay, so right now, it's 2021. I am national ambassador for Braver Angels. It is my job to communicate the mission of the organization, in some respects, to sort of shine a light on the broader, what we might call bridging movements. Some might call it unity movements or what have you. You, of course, are now a member of staff of Braver Angels as well. Probably should have started with that. Introduce yourself, first of all, Luke. What are your credits and accolades? How should people know you?
Sure thing. Well, my name is Luke Nathan Phillips. I am the Publius Fellow for Public Discourse at Braver Angels. I do work in the debates team and the media team in that organization, and I run a weekly speaker series called America's Public Forum. Aside from that, I live in the Washington, D.C. area and write articles for various policy magazines and book reviews for these various magazines. Not as much as I should. But I'm working on it, and so I'm probably your penultimate useless intellectual who also dabbles in social activism and stuff along those lines. And I've had a lot of good opportunities to do that in the context of Braver Angels, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here right now too. So yeah,
Outstanding. Okay, so let's rewind the clock about 8 years ago or so. 8 years ago, so. Let's say about February of 2013, I stepped in to a diner in Westchester, part of Los Angeles, near LAX, into a meeting of the 62nd Republican Central Committee. because I had made up my mind to run for Congress, and I didn't really know how exactly to do that. I was a registered Republican. We had moved back to Los Angeles from Colorado. My wife was in the Army. I decided to run for Congress. I would be running against Congresswoman Maxine Waters at the time, but I did not, it wasn't so much a function of me wanting to run against Maxine Waters as much as it was a desire on my part to want to sort of build bridges between the American people in the context of politics. I thought that there was a story to be told about the legitimate perspectives of liberals and conservatives, and I wanted to bring them into dialogue.
And importantly, because at this point you thought the best way to do that would be in running for political office and putting yourself out in the arena to represent your fellow citizens in a specific office.
Well, that's right. I didn't anticipate that I had much of a chance of winning, but the interesting thing was that I aimed high in part because I didn't have too many opportunities to aim low, really. I didn't have a background in politics beyond having been a foot soldier for Obama's campaign in 2008, right? So, some folks will know that story, but maybe we'll fill in some blanks here as we go. And having been sort of an activist in an informal sort of way, opposing the Iraq War, so on and so forth, eventually became a Republican. But I didn't have enough of a resume to get hired by any big time campaign or to walk into any media establishment or anything like that and make myself known. YouTube was already starting to take off, without folks who hadn't jumped into it early. And I didn't really know how to do that at the time. The thing that I knew was that I was good at talking to people. I knew the issues well. And so I just wanted an opportunity to sort of express myself in terms of how I thought politics, should and could be. And so it was more or less a coincidence that I ran against Congresswoman Waters. But walking into this diner, into this central committee meeting, I introduced myself as somebody who was interested in running for Congress, running against Maxine Waters. And immediately, all the folks in the room sort of went up in, ecstatic, jubilation. And that is sort of where it all started. And it's funny because there's a fellow in that room named Marco, nice guy. I told him when I stepped into the room what I was thinking of doing, but I hadn't announced myself to the group, broadly speaking. And when I listened to this small group of folks, and it was a very small group, just people from the neighborhood. Everybody there was older, just about, overwhelmingly white group, older white conservative folks, which was no big surprise. But just a small group of people. And yet, in the middle of it, I thought to myself, like, these people seem like they've been Republican activists for a long, long time. What am I really doing here? Do I really know what I'm doing? And when asked to introduce myself, I'll tell you that I actually sort of choked in that moment. I was, I think I was still 25 years old, and I did not say that I was there because I was interested in pursuing this campaign. I suddenly had a crippling moment of doubt, and this fellow Marco, as I went to sit back down after introducing myself, he said, "No," he said, "Tell him the rest." He said, "Tell him why you're really here." And I stood back up and I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, really the reason I'm here is because I plan on running for Congress in the 43rd District of California against Maxine Waters." And people were just like, "Amazing." And a woman came up to me immediately and she said, "I'll endorse you." She said, "But we've got to get to work." And I was like, "Really? You're not going to ask me any questions about where I stand on policy or anything like that?" Nobody cared about any of that. And so I set off on this journey where I launched this scrappy campaign for Congress, speaking at black churches and to Tea Party and Republican clubs and committees and so forth across LA County.
And if I recall correctly, going to some of the Congresswoman's town halls as well.
I went to one of Maxine Waters' town halls, a town hall in which she recognized me. She knew who I was. So this would have been in late 2013. Actually, may have been September or October. The context was that there was an ongoing rollout of the Affordable Care Act and in the state of California. in particular. And Congresswoman Waters was encouraging her constituents to sign up. This was also right after right after some debates had been unfolding in Congress as to whether or not the United States should launch missile strikes in Syria to beat back Bashar al-Assad, who is seeking to, I guess, sort of repress some elements in that country. A number of things were going on at that time, but Maxine Waters sort of called me out, kind of pulled me into a debate with her, which I wasn't actually planning on debating her at that time. But it went very well for me. And then I never really got the opportunity to share the stage publicly with Congresswoman Waters again after that. But so I launched the Scrappy campaign for Congress, raised very little money. But by the end of it, while I still lost by about 70% of the vote, in scratching the underside of 30%, I did better than any Republican or Democrat had ever done running against Maxine Waters over the course of her, at the time, about 42-year career, I think, or maybe 40 years or so. And I was elected thereafter vice chairman of the Republican Party of LA County in a very toxic and contentious internal party election that I was not ready for.
And was that in 2014 or 2015? Which year was that?
Yes. So this took place. This election took place in December of 2014.
Okay.
Not long after my race, not long after the 2014 midterm, and I took office somewhere in the beginning of 2015. And it was in that year that, well, so I had a mission to sort of bring a culture of depolarization, of sort of, goodwill and fraternal kind of relationships.
Of patriotic empathy, to use a great word.
Yes, a culture of patriotic empathy. Thank you very much, Luke, for keeping us on brand. Yeah, I tried to bring a culture of patriotic empathy to the Republican Party on an institutional level in LA and California. Because, I ran basically as a hope and change Republican, to be quite honest. And, many people recognize that. I had worked for Obama's campaign, believed in this idea of a post-partisan, post-racial America, post-racial politics, but I tried to bring that perspective to partisan politics, which was, predictably a difficult thing to do, and found it to be as difficult as one might think when I was working in the GOP. And in that context, I looked for other allies, other spaces to sort of get connected with, and I decided to reach out to No Labels, national bipartisan organization fostering bipartisanship in Congress, to see if I could get involved in their work and leverage my presence in the LA GOP to those sorts of ends. And it's at that point that you enter into my story, and I enter into yours. So you want to pick up that thread? And
sure thing.
Remind me what happened.
What
happened next?
Well, this is one of my favorite parts of the story, but I suppose I should give a little bit of personal backdrop as well too. So while John was getting himself up to his knees in door knocking and preaching and in churches and preaching at Tea Party meetings and just generally figuring out the ropes and the ins and outs of grassroots politics, I was a starry-eyed student at the University of Southern California. Marching in the marching band, studying international relations, thinking I was going to be some badass kind of like super secret spy working for the government, have a girlfriend in every country, speak 7 languages once I got out, and like nobody would ever.
As we all do.
Yeah, precisely. It's a great career ambition to have at least some point in your life. So I was just diving into studies. USC is not the best school in terms of being a school where you learn like what human life means, right? USC is a really good school for learning how to do things. That's why we make engineers. That's why we make business majors and whatever. But it's not really the kind of place where you go for the advance of human knowledge and stuff. And I think at some fundamental level, that was what I had been hungry for and wound up just like perusing too many obscure treatises by various American political theorists from the last 100 years, and also deciding at some point that, hey, if I'm going to, as long as I'm going to be doing this, I should figure out a practical way to do it too. So between 2013 and 2015, when I met John, I pushed myself through a course of just like uh, absorbing as much as I could about different political theories and political ideologies, trying to find my perfect political ideology, trying to figure out like what kind of conservative am I think was my basic point. And so I started off in like high school in 2012 and early college in 2012, trying to be like, okay, I'm a libertarian. I know I'm a libertarian. So what kind of libertarian am I? And then over the course of those things, I was like, well, I guess I'm not really a libertarian. I like Alexander Hamilton too much. And so maybe I'm some kind of nationalists. So what kind of nationalist am I? And so I like did some research into that and realized I was not really that. And at some point realized, well, this whole ideological dispensation thing is bad. You just need to be practical. I'm a pragmatist. I'll be a centrist. I'll be a moderate and a bipartisan guy, and I'll do that. And in doing that, I'll be the right kind of conservative too. So that was how I eventually fell in with No Labels and went and joined their student program and went to some of their national conferences, at one of which I saw the future 45th president of the United States speak, and it was kind of trippy to see that in person before the 2016 election got into full thing. But it's just interesting stuff. But yeah, so I spent a long time like just reading a bunch of magazines, reading a bunch of books, trying to figure out like what exactly am I. And in the summer of 2015, when No Labels put a guy named John Wood in touch with me over email, I was kind of thinking like, okay, so the way I'm going to be like some technocratic, like everybody's domestic policy advisor in Washington, D.C. is I'm going to be the perfect centrist who knows the exact details of like every policy and will come up with the right policies and will do that. And if I can be that to the right future congressman, future senator, future president of the United States, I can go be some kind of like deep policy advisor and do that kind of thing.
So you were looking for coattails to ride?
Yeah, you could say that. Well, coattails and also like patronage, I guess too, right? Is maybe another way to think of it. And in a lot of DC world, there's a lot of people who don't really want to be elected to anything, who do want to have influence over the way the policy world works, which is a completely fair kind of thing because frankly electeds have a different kind of lifestyle than policy people, right? And so it is ironic that when we first met, John, you were set on changing the tone and culture of American politics in basically the ways that you think now. And I was set on like coming up with like new policy dispensations and arrangements and solutions in very different ways compared to what I think I've come to in the 5 or 6 years since. But it just happened to meet up and we became friends, and we have an ongoing professional partnership and good and easy friendship that's been going on since then. But let me tell them the story of the Rose Garden. Does that work?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So John always
Luke famously has preambles that are as long and involved as mine, which is good because it gives me a chance to catch my breath. And
I'm happy to do that service. Me and you probably should work on that one of these days. I feel like there's.
Don't worry, the people in the comments will be sure to encourage us in
in
that direction. But I do have to admit, a lot of folks enjoy listening to me, and I imagine would enjoy listening to you in part because some people actually enjoy the verbal voyages. But let's not torture folks any longer. So, okay. So you and I do actually meet at some point. So,
yes. Yeah. So long story short, John and I traded a few emails about like what we're interested in. And so I guess in some sense it was kind of like online dating, which is a weird way to think about it. But yeah, it kind of was. And so we were like, okay, well, let's go meet up in the Exposition Park Rose Garden. And I went to the fountain in the middle of the Exposition Park Rose Garden where John and I were to meet at like 4 p.m. on a Sunday or something like that.
And this is near USC.
Yeah. And so full disclosure, I had, oh God, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but like, I guess I had kind of assumed that John Wood was white. And you are white, you're half white, but like you're black passing, right? But I did not assume that John Wood was a black guy, right? And, thinking about that over the last couple of years, I have been like, just kind of like thinking, is there unconscious bias there? Is there just like cultural expectations or whatever? I don't really know that.
I have to admit that I was, it took me well after the first time meeting you to realize that you were half Filipino. And so that, you don't have to feel too bad on that front.
Well, it works there. But yeah, so long story short, I was just sitting at the Rose Garden, and then John walked over, tall black guy, cool looking guy, had a suaveness about him that I was like, oh, Okay, I thought this would be just like some nerdy white guy kind of thing. But yeah, so John and I met. We chatted about the projects we were doing at that point. I think his project at that point was New Era America, and my project at that point was the Progressive Republican League. Names that have since faded into the ashes of our pasts, but things that at those points were very deeply important to us, and we bonded about it, and we talked about like that kind of thing.
So I will pause you there.
Yeah.
And mention that actually I'll probably for folks who are watching this, they'll probably hear you muted out in saying the name of my project, because I'm contractually, obliged not to disclose it. And this is why I said early on that we're coming full circle here. So most folks publicly will not know, but prior to my coming to Braver Angels and after my having been a nominee for Congress and been a vice chairman of the Republican Party in LA County, I sought to launch a digital media network that was meant to be akin to the Young Turks or to, the Daily Wire or something like that, in as much as it would, be political. It would have a number of different programs under a central umbrella, but different in that it was meant to take people from left and right who disagreed about politics, but who agreed about how we ought to treat each other in politics. It was meant to highlight a culture of discourse that unfolded along those lines. And it was meant to jump off the screen, ultimately, into people's local communities. The idea was to build up a national following where people could engage in conversations and organizing locally with like-minded people from across the aisle. And I sought to build up this media network. I had a pilot program for it, but was ultimately hit with a cease and desist letter by a very large company that didn't like the fact that the name of our network was somewhat close to theirs. And so it was a trademark dispute. I didn't have the legal or financial firepower to
we got to come up with a clever pseudonym or a clever euphemism for that the organization that was once called that, but we'll figure out one of these days. So,
well, yeah, and lo and behold, it would not be the last time I'd find myself in a situation
God help us
like that. Well, but I was working on that project, and you, my friend, I believe, were my very first interview for the launch of that pilot show for that early media network. And here you are now, one of my first interviews for the relaunched John Wood Jr. show.
Well, I've lost a little weight since then, so if you can keep from showing them that original video, that'd be helpful for
Actually,
my image.
That original video is still up. We had re-released that under Braver Angels at some point a few years ago. We may have to re-up it for this occasion for folks who are interested in the deep trivial history of John Wood Jr. And Luke Phillips. So pick up the thread. You and I meet at Exposition Park.
Yeah. So John and I met at Exposition Park. Just chatted, figured out we were gonna go do some meet up and plan some scheming. Figure out ways that I could help with my editing skills, and figure out ways that he could use his interview skills on various things. And so yeah, we started doing that. I was living in DC over the summers with my family and doing internships in DC at that point. So I was hopping deeper into journalism world and policy world at that time. But I remember distinctly, I think probably that fall or sometime the next year, John gave me the full vision of the media network with a mass social national movement he's talking about at Jackson Joe down on Figueroa Street. Best breakfast place here in LA, in my opinion. But then again, I don't live here and don't know.
It's a great spot.
It's one of my favorites. And so there's a so John gave me the full.
We went there this morning, but it was closed.
Well, may they open again soon, and I hope to be back in LA soon enough so that I can go eat their blueberry puree pancakes with lemon butter. Those are so good. But yeah, so John over Jackson Joe over blueberry puree pancakes with lemon butter was telling me the story of or not the story, but the vision, the outline, the concept of this new media network that would have a social civil society community with it, and there would be like different initiatives going different directions in terms of like how do we do mutual aid stuff, how do we do political campaigning stuff and new messaging. And I just remember listening to him, and I think I literally sent a message to our friend Alan Reynolds after this, like thinking like, Alan, John is great, I love the hell out of him. He's crazy. His vision is utopian and not particularly attuned to the realities of politics. He has great energy and we can do this kind of stuff, but I don't see why he's doing this, and I love him and I'll help him with it. But
This sounds
man,
like a critique that's probably leveled at me to this day. I
well,
suspect.
for what
Alan
it's worth,
Reynolds,
for all the
former city commissioner and former independent candidate for state assembly, was it?
yeah, I think he was a candidate for the state assembly, and I think he's been involved in his wonderful hometown at South Pasadena at various levels of activism there. So great guy, one of my good friends here in California stuff. So Alan, hello.
Shout out to Alan Reynolds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I told John that critique, and John, you're right that you get this critique. We at Braver Angels get this critique all the time. I didn't understand at that point, but that was when the John Wood Jr. magic started to seep into my brain in ways that I am I'm unable to escape it now. But the thing you all got to understand about John Wood Jr. is his basic shtick, his basic modus operandi is he takes people who are critical. He takes movements and organizations and kind of causes that go against his broader kind of patriotic empathy and expansion of the social hearth and the civic love hearth. He takes those and he doesn't destroy them, and he doesn't try to humiliate them. He doesn't try to embarrass them. He doesn't even really fight against their critiques. He just goes and says, well, I see that. But you're still welcome to work with me. And over time, there's a way in which he wins their hearts in ways that they find it very hard to disestablish themselves from. And lo and behold, that happened to me sometime in the course of 2016, 2017. And what once had been me trying to be a hard nose.
Luke.
Yeah, well, it's true. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm nothing if not sappy on various things, but this in particular, because John, you got to realize, and you knew this, like I was a very hardcore, not even like a flaming conservative, but like an elitist kind of like, there is a way to do like policy and politics, right? There is a way that I will find where I can be like the policy minister going and manipulating things behind the scenes, and it will be realistic and it'll be gritty and hard nosed and unflinching in the face of human nature. And if there's a sense of things that have to be like it's not about being nice to people. It's not about like building things. It's about going and just doing what must be done, right? That was my my political theory at that point.
Weren't too concerned with the human element.
No, not at all. Yeah. And to some degree, to be honest, I think I'm probably more attuned to the tragic reality of things more than you are, and more than various others of our colleagues in Braver Angels are. So I still have like that in me. But the thing is, over the course of many conversations, many long drives, many just chats about the nature of things, and chats about like what has been the best of America and how do we fix up America towards its better self sometimes. The thing that you've impressed on me over the course of all that, and why I am unflinchingly just kind of like the original John Wood Jr. stan in this particular bit of the world, is that I think you helped me to be a better nationalist, a better conservative, a better patriot, in helping me realize that the old Ronald Reagan quip, how can we love our country without loving our countrymen, was not just a propaganda thing. It was not just a rhetoric thing, but it's a very real commitment you have to live. And if you don't live it, if you're just about like, how do we win the next election? How do we get the right policy things so we can destroy our enemies? You might win a lot, but you've also lost something big. And I don't think I would have really been open to realizing that, particularly at a democratic political level, out of like my kind of cloistered elitism in that all of us journalists fall into sometimes. I wouldn't have believed that had it not been for just interacting with and hearing your visions and realizing that your visions are things that I should think about in my own visions too. So thank you for all that, John.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're welcome. I certainly, didn't necessarily have that endpoint consciously in mind in terms of the particulars of your growth. But I mean, what I would say about myself is simply that I think that I have always sought to take sort of the essential value set that we receive in kindergarten. Really, you've heard this, this phrase, everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten, right? This is something that used to be up on a poster in our school principal's office. I've always sought to take those basic sorts of qualities of interpersonal kindness and compassion and understanding, and show how they are not merely sort of, items of vanity, right, reserved either for children or for do-gooder adults, right, disconnected from the world of our material and social concerns, but that rather, these deeper sorts of virtues, of empathy and compassion and love, ultimately, and goodwill, tied directly to the functioning of every other aspect of our civilization, right? Everything that matters to us politically and materially, economically, et cetera, et cetera. Everything ultimately ties back to human relationships, which ties back to human kindness, human understanding, human empathy, and the human heart. And so I've always been trying to sort of complete that circle. But what I lacked at the time that you and I met was really sort of a vehicle for being able to, beyond just being sort of a roaming, preacher of a civic gospel that most folks, weren't familiar with, beyond somebody who would try and echo the sentiments of Dr. King, but
Every
without.
great movement needs its John the Baptists, and you were that for some time as
Well,
well.
I mean, I definitely was sort of preaching in the wilderness, but it was thanks to you that I ultimately got connected with Better Angels. So
Well,
why don't
may I
you?
tell that story?
Yes, please, by all means.
So, long story short, I mentioned I had been interning in DC policy world for a bit. I interned at a magazine then called The American Interest for a guy named Adam Garfinkel. One of Adam Garfinkel's, and Adam Garfinkel is the best. He's the guy who taught me how to think
The
and how
great
to.
Adam Garfinkel.
One
I would
of
say.
the best educators and editors that America has had in a long time, and may he keep doing his good writing work, and we hope to see him soon. But so Adam Garfinkel was worked with a guy named David Blankenhorn. David Blankenhorn had previously, and you need to bring David Blankenhorn on the show one of these days because his story is fascinating
I
as well.
plan on it. Yeah.
Well, Blankenhorn had been in the aftermath of the 2016 election, doing stuff with an organization he called Better Angels that was doing family therapy stuff for Red Blue Politics. And he was writing pieces about that at the American Interest magazine. And because I had interned at the American Interest magazine and just like absorbed all of its content and tried to learn everything I could from Adam Garfinkel, I saw these articles at the American Interest, and this was before my quote unquote conversion, I guess. I was like, oh, civil discourse. What would Lincoln do? I don't really care about this, but you know who would care about this is John. So I passed some of the articles along to John. I clicked the link and found that there was a whole organization behind it called Better Angels. I sent that along to John. And John, I think when I sent it to you, you said something, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you told me something along the lines of, Luke, look at this. This is a group that has the national network and the kind of platform of like website and all that kind of stuff, and they have the ideas right and they have the right spirit, but they don't have the vision for communicating it. They don't have the vision for the media strategy. They don't have the suave personality and handsome guy doing all the cool stuff. And then you were like, and I don't have the media network or the national network of institutions or the funding, but I do have the profound charisma and great vision and ideas for media stuff.
Okay.
And he didn't say this. This is me putting it into it. But
I was gonna
yeah.
say, oh, maybe I was thinking some bit of that. I mean, I definitely.
It was a
wasn't-
good fit. It was a good
I
fit.
definitely wasn't that detailed in whatever. I have no idea what I said. I can't remember, but I do remember what I thought. Which is that. So you sent me the website.
Yeah.
So at the time, the organization was called Better Angels.
Right.
And I looked at Better Angels website after you sent it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so this, for folks listening, this happened. Luke sent me this link at a what was a real low point for me, because I had, I had lost in my campaign for office. I failed up sort of, in as much as people were still interested in my prospects, and I sort of pivoted into this office with the Republican Party in Los Angeles. But my experience there was not unfolding in a terribly positive way. It didn't seem to be like the venue for advocating for the cultural shift that I wanted to see. I wound up having problems with the toxicity in the party even before the Trump phenomenon sort of came into town. And when it did, it sort of seemed clear to me that this was not really the vehicle for me. So I had I'd left active involvement with the party. I had this idea for a digital media network. It was inspired in part at the time by Dave Rubin, because Dave at the time was sort of moving towards the Rubin Report was sort of this hub for cross-cultural, heterodox conversations, really. And you had the folks from, ultimately you'd have folks from Sam Harris to Ben Shapiro sort of having dialogues across the center space. And it seemed to me like there was a moment that could be built upon in a way that reached further out in each direction and brought in the cross-cultural element more explicitly, et cetera. But my idea for a media network that would accomplish those things, that again, as I said earlier, would jump off the screen and into physical local communities, had seemed dashed by this trademark dispute that I had with this major corporation. And so I was at a low point, but when you sent me the Better Angels website, yeah, I did look at it and I thought to myself, these people have exactly the same philosophy that I do. They are already doing the sorts of things in local communities through this red blue workshop model that they had, bringing together small groups of conservatives and liberals, not to argue or debate right off, but to speak from personal experience in terms of why they saw politics the way that they did, to cultivate empathy and understanding, etc. I thought, and it was a national membership organization. I thought they're already doing the things on the ground that I would want to do, that I wanted the media network to lead to. But the website at the time was text heavy and pixelated. There was a Facebook page that was, pretty much, barren. There was a YouTube channel with a couple of nice clips on it, but nothing much else going on other than that. They seemed not to have a digital strategy. I don't think I was thinking at the time too much in terms of being like a spokesperson, so on and so forth. But I suspected that their on the ground strategy could be wedded to my digital media strategy, which operated according to a very similar, very harmonious sort of philosophy. And, because I had wanted one to sort of lead to the other anyway. And so then it became a question of, well, how can we get these folks' attention? And you had already had some correspondence, as it turned out, through your involvement with a publication called The American Moderate, with Better Angels, person who would become Better Angels' chief marketing officer, our today close colleague, Kieran O'Connor. Am I remembering that correctly?
You are, yeah. I had forgotten about the American Moderate, but you're right. I did reach out to them about that to do a symposium on some immigration or something like that. Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So that happened. Yep.
Yeah. So you had, I think, some interaction or some relationship with Kieran, and folks who are familiar with me, many of folks, certainly if you're familiar with Braver Angels, you're likely to be familiar with Kieran O'Connor, my co-host on the Braver Angels podcast, our co-host, I should say, because you jump in the mix now and again.
And just a cool guy on all kinds of fronts too.
The coolest of dudes. Let it be known.
Yes.
And folks will see him on here too. So I had a conversation with Kieran O'Connor. Had a conversation with Randy Leoz, who was organizing local Better Angels members in Southern California.
Well, and he's still organizing local Braver Angels members all over the country now, too. So, yeah.
He is now, and he's one of our most gifted writers and ambassadors and workshop moderators. And Randy plays every position in Braver Angels. I had a conversation with David Lapp, co-founder of Better Angels, who was organizing on the ground in Ohio and also our close friend and colleague. But ultimately, I decided that I've got to check out one of these workshops in person. So you and I drove down to San Diego.
Well, first, before we drove down to San Diego, we hopped in the Woodmobile, and then we drove down to San Diego. The Woodmobile, if you guys haven't heard about it yet, is John's, what is it, a 1981 Mercedes?
It's an 81 380 SL. It's a classic Benz that I've been struggling to maintain since I got it out of high school.
It is a really cool car, and I hope to see it at future conventions, John. So yeah,
sure.
we'll trip it.
Well, we probably have to hold a convention pretty close to LA
Yeah.
for me to get it there. But yeah, so we hopped in the Woodmobile, as Luke aptly refers to it. We drove down to San Diego to participate in a workshop, which just so happened to be run by Bill Doherty, Braver Angels co-founder and architect of Braver Angels, of the majority of Braver Angels workshops and other programs, nationally renowned family therapist
and the therapeutic brains behind the whole model of it all.
Yeah, really. I mean, there is no Braver Angels without Bill Doherty.
Right.
Absolutely. Professor of psychology at the University of Minnesota, and a person who's done incredible work brokering cross-cultural conversations, conversations across racial divides between the white and the African American community in Minneapolis, in particular, and between young black men and law enforcement. It's another subject. But Bill was moderating the workshop.
It was also attended by David Blankenhorn.
Well, which is going to get to next. President and founder of Braver Angels. Also in the mix was an old fellow with a guitar
who we didn't know
sitting in a corner of the room. By the way, this is just so folks understand. This was a 7-hour workshop. The Red Blue Workshop is an extended affair if you do it in its original format. And there's this old fellow holding a guitar, smiling at folks the whole time. And after 7 hours, he gets up and he starts, after the workshop is done, he gets up and he starts to sing, this land is your land, this land is my land, from New York Island, da 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 da. And just goes through the, every verse of it. And after about 6 minutes, I'm like, this guy sounds okay, but I am tired. And I really wish, he'd bring it to a close. Why isn't anybody telling this guy to stop? And then Braver Angels, then Better Angels, founder David Blankenhorn stands up when he finally does finish, puts his arm around him and says, folks, for anybody who doesn't know, this is my good friend Peter Yarrow of Peter, Paul, and Mary. And I was like, oh, okay.
The Puff the Magic Dragon guy.
Exactly. That's why you can't tell him to sit down. But Peter Yarrow, no, seriously, it was an
well, I remember this a little bit
on
differently because I didn't know who he was either before that. But I distinctly remember the whole group of all these Reds and Blues, including us and including everybody else, and it was in San Diego. We all got in a circle and we got in each other's arms and swayed around and
Is
sang.
that how we did it?
Yeah. We sang the last couple verses because Peter Yarrow was like, everybody now, and it was great. That was my very first.
Yeah, I guess that's maybe about how it.
That was my very first Better Angels experience, and regrettably, not every Better Angels member and Braver Angels member has had the opportunity to sing "This Land Is Your Land" with Peter Yarrow at their first workshop. But it sold me and made me realize there was something spiritual there. But John, at the end of that, and we had good conversations with David Blankenhorn at that. We had good conversations with some of the other folks who were there at it.
Well, and I would say, just to round out the story a little bit here, that so it was my desire to let Better Angels know about my media network idea. And so I sort of thought that it was a long shot that anybody would take me seriously, and that if they did, I'd have to probably work my way up the ladder over the course of months to get a fair hearing for the idea. So we introduced ourselves to David. I guess David knew that we were coming. And first of all, I just found it really easy to sort of connect with David right off.
He's as folksy as Lincoln all the way down. So
David is folksy. He's a down-to-earth, humble guy who also is deeply insightful,
right.
And lacking pretentiousness, in any sort of way. And I remember just sort of getting not even halfway through, sort of explaining the idea of a media network to him that could facilitate depolarization, and he stopped me in the middle of it and he said, "That's incredible." He said, "That's exactly what we should be doing here." And so I thought, oh, well, maybe the opportunity is there to do something. And so things picked up from then, but go ahead and pick it up from where you're leaving.
Well, I just remember we were walking down the sidewalk after having said goodbye to Blankenhorn and to the others. I think there's still actually pictures of us on Facebook at that first meeting.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what was going to become of that in the longer run then, but I'm glad we got those pictures. But I just remember turning to you and being like, "John, this is great. This is good work. This is it's maybe some of what the country needs. It's not me. I can't really do much
No,
of this."
that's true. I do remember
I'm
that.
really.
Yeah. You were not sold that this was the.
No, I was like,
you.
I need to. I mean, I'll come to workshops and I'll like volunteer a little bit, I guess. But my mission is American nationalism. My mission is we need to reshape the conservative movement, the Republican Party, to be something that can do the right policy stuff and the right kind of politics for the coming elections and for the coming century. And I didn't think at that point that depolarization, civil discourse work, anything like that was really part of it at all. So I told John, I can't work with you on this. This is a journey that I won't follow you on, but good luck. And if I can be modestly helpful sometimes, then I guess I'll help. And John was like, "Okay, well, I'll probably call on you to do some editing work sometime because we'll probably need that." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, that works. But I'm not going to join you, just so you know. I'm not going to be a member." And so
I do remember thinking even then though that there's no need to fight with Luke on this because if this works out, then people will recognize that it works out, and if it's a thing that presents opportunities, not just for myself but for the people who I work closely with and believe in, that'll make itself plain in the course of time.
John's
Which
saying that
I
that I as a good grifter would recognize the grift potential of hopping on his coattails. So, but more importantly than that, far more importantly than that, I didn't think at the time that there was any good to be done in building the future of America in terms of just civil discourse stuff. I didn't think patriotism and like decent policy thought and decent political activism really would involve helping reds and blues figure out how to be nice to each other. And damn how wrong I was. If I've learned anything over the last 4 or 5 years, it's that at some level you can be really competent at whatever kind of part of policy world, whatever kind of part of the political elections process you're doing. You can be great at that and do great things. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't incorporate in it a kind of way to be good with your fellow Americans who will never agree with you on the majority of things. You can do good things, but you're always missing something. And the thing that I realized about Better Angels in the year and the 2 years and the 3 years after that workshop in San Diego, John, is that you saw something before a lot of us did, and helped a lot of us to realize that there are ways that being a patriot is not just like loving your country; it's loving your countrymen.
Hmm.
It's working to build a better culture of public discourse and do the hard work to change yourself to be able to participate in a better public discourse that helps us all to be examples and helps us all to live something at a really earnest, authentic level that is not, to put it lightly, what our contemporary media environment, political situation, discourse, all that kind of encourages. And the reason we are braver angels now, not just better angels, but braver angels, is because at some point it's a thankless task. At some point it's something that you have to do it because you really are committed to doing it. And I wasn't committed at that point, and it took me a while to get there. But it was in many large parts by your continuing friendship and example to do that. So, but meantime,
so ultimately, we have the opportunity to enter into and to help build a community that models precisely that phenomenon that you're describing. You know, and so what wound up happening was I had already, so in the aftermath of the workshop, and you telling me that this is great, I will root for you from afar and watching how things go with you in this. I had already had a written sort of treatment of the media network design for my own purposes, which I sort of refitted as a proposal for a Better Angels media network. I shared that with David Blankenhorn and Kieran O'Connor after talking to Kieran about the idea at some length, and Kieran and I really sort of, that's where we first creatively meshed. It was in that very first couple of conversations over the phone where we sort of explored the idea of what a media network could look like, how it could amplify the effort, the culture, enrich the community of Better Angels, and allow us to make an impact at a much greater scale than was perhaps being imagined at the time. So I sent that document to Kieran and to David. Heard back from David. Had a call with him where he told me that he read the proposal. In fact, he read it 3 times, and he said to me that I want to build out this media network. He said I want to hire you to do it. He said, and even more than that, he said I want us to be able to get behind you as a voice in our conversation, as a public intellectual, as a writer, and as a leader. Because I think that David, speaking to me, he more or less said that he said I think that America could really use your voice in the dialogue, and and that was just, even thinking about it now, just moves me, man, in an emotional way to think about it, because so many of us in American life put so much time into advocating for the things that we believe, participating in American democracy. Whether you're an activist or somebody who cares about policy or part of an organization one way or the other. But, so many of us, probably most of us, never really get to make a living that way, much less experience, sort of greater public recognition for
Well,
our
and make
work.
a living, but also just have the opportunity to dedicate all your time and all your energy and all
Yeah.
yourself into it in ways that it's just not as possible to do before you're doing that.
Now, one thing I ought to have mentioned is the fact that at this time, and so this is now fall of 2017. It's 4 years after I had decided to run for Congress. I stepped foot onto the campaign trail at 25. I was now 29. I was married and a father of one when I started running for Congress. I was father of two at the time that you and I went to that workshop. I was balancing multiple part-time jobs as I had been during the campaign, trying to allow enough flexibility for me to stay involved in the sort of political and activist and organizing work that I really wanted to sort of lead towards, a career that could be a vessel for the passions that I had. And my wife patiently bore with me, through each and every one of those seasons of uncertainty, without any promise that any of it would work out in a way, that would allow our family to benefit. And, there are certainly folks in my life who were saying that, John, you got to put all this stuff down and get a regular 9 to 5 and just stick with that. So this was a moment of incredible vindication as well as opportunity for me. And David concluded that statement by saying that there's only one problem, John. We don't have any money, And so I was like, oh, of course. He said, but he said, if you volunteer with us for now, he said, we'll put together a fundraising effort to try and raise the money that will allow us to bring you on officially. And so fast forward, a few months, I had worked alongside Kieran remotely, building up the original sort of kind of sloppy looking media network page. We sort of revitalized the Better Angels podcast. Um, and flew out to Manhattan to meet the board of directors, other future colleagues. Saw Bill Doherty again. Met Donna Murphy, if I'm not mistaken, one of our lead organizers. And Braver Angels OG from the very beginning. Met April Lawson, who was then on the board of directors, and who it was immediately evident to me was a special and a powerful mind and heart in this space.
She's built the debates program from scratch in ways that none of us could have foreseen it blowing up and becoming something real. So
That's right. Architect of the Braver Angels debates program. And I was hired as a member of staff in spring of 2018. At that time, I can't quite remember how many members we might have had, but since then, we've grown into an organization with over 10,000 active dues-paying members, 80 local Braver Angels alliances across the country, bipartisan local chapters, more or less. We call them alliances. We are a nationally recognized brand. We've been covered by just about every major media outlet, left and right. We have a presence in the digital media space that has grown substantially. We've interacted and highlighted senators and governors and activists and city council people and artists and musicians, and we've dealt with racial issues, we've dealt with policy issues, we've organized people locally, we've made an impact nationally. We've got a community that feels like a family, more than 10,000 strong, but a family nevertheless.
And not just a family, but a cause, and a cause that demands something of every single individual who goes into it, right?
That's right.
To be not just something that can do something in the world, but to be something that's better than what you have been, right? And better in the sense of being better to people in ways that, as you said, we've known since kindergarten. It's just so darn hard to figure out in the real world, and that's what we're doing. Right?
That's right. And it still feels like we've just begun.
Yeah.
So,
well, there's and just as a little coda script here, there's a lot of implications of this work at institutional levels, at political theory levels, at just general political coalitions levels, that over the course of the 2020s and 2030s, I'm sure John, me and you, and April and Kieran and Randy and Greg and Paul and Isabel and all our friends in this kind of work are going to be figuring out over time. And but it's all started in a relatively short time in a movement of Americans of good faith and goodwill to build a house united, and it's succeeded beyond our wildest dreams so far. And I guess part of me is just like, let's hold down the fort and keep it up and see what we can do in the coming storms and glories ahead. So yeah.
Amen. And for folks who are watching us, we encourage you to be a part of it. Sign up. Stick your toes in the water. America needs folks to be able to come together from across every starting point in our national experience if we're going to be able to tell a story about American society that really represents everybody and gives us a reason to feel invested in each other as Americans. If we don't have that, we don't have a country. So this has been the John Wood Jr. Show. If you're interested, get involved at Braver Angels, braverangels.org. Like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. As ever, we are building a house united. Luke Phillips, thank you, my friend, for starting me on this phase of the journey. May the road be long.
Thank you for letting me come along, John. It's always been a pleasure and an honor.
Indeed.